this is Johnny. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to have a conversation with my guest here. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi guys, I am Saide and I'm currently in Florida, and we're going to talk about our journeys with fibro and all kinds of illnesses that really deplete you. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. How long have you had it?
I think I've had it since childhood, honestly, but I didn't understand that I had it probably until I was my sophomore year of college. So
Yeah.
since I was since I was a child, but it presented itself in a big traumatic episode around 19, I would say.
So like with ME, the biggest challenge I think early on is diagnosis, right? And like going to doctors and have them validating that you have something. Was that similar experience for you where you would go to doctors over and over and over again and it was hard to diagnose? Like what was that like for you?
Yes. So first I could tell I had some sort of depression because I loved school and I wasn't going to school anymore, but I felt like my body was aching on top of the depression. So I just really didn't understand. So I started going to a therapist actually first for my traumas. And along that same time, because of my pain and not being able to sleep, I decided to go to a regular primary care doctor. And they encouraged me to go see a rheumatologist just because it just seemed like swelling. And from the rheumatologist, they wanted me to take pills. And so every time I would go to a different doctor, it was just symptom treatment. So I was the one who like started going to different specialists like dermatologists and kept feeling the same thing, like symptom treatment until I actually did the research and narrowed down my symptoms. I brought it to my doctor, and the last thing, really, my diagnosis has really been through myself because no one has ever, the comments are always, you're young, you look healthy, work out, eat better, you should be okay. So it was me presenting it to the doctor, and she said, well, if your symptoms fit, it doesn't matter because we just have to treat what's going on with you. So at some point I actually just stopped going and I started doing my own wellness.
So similar to probably a lot of people watching this, you had to be your own advocate because a lot of people
Correct.
that are leaving comments and subscribers and stuff, they tell me how they keep going to doctors, and they have to tell the doctor, you know, what they want done, and they have to find the right person. One thing one reason I was looking forward to interviewing you is because on my channel, I give a lot of the male perspective a lot. I mentioned the female perspective of chronic illness. And me personally, I feel like ME and fibro are in the same family. I think it's just a different expression of the same illness. That's the more I learn, the more I think it might be the same thing.
I agree.
And
I mean, they've categorized it together, like CFS, is it chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, and fibro?
Yeah. So it's more and more time goes, it seems like they are kind of interlocking, where it's like inflammation, central nervous system issues. But one main thing that I wanted to hear, and I think people would appreciate to hear, is what has it been like to be a woman having chronic illness, and not only in society, but what was it like early on going to the doctor? Because for me, it was just kind of like, just tough it out, walk it off.
I should just start crying now before I tell you how it feels. But actually, one of the things that I was going to mention earlier about how often I went to the doctor and not feeling heard, one of very poignant experience was since I had so many symptoms and I felt like I wasn't being heard, I had asked Dan, my husband, to come with, and him being in the room changed the fact that I was being listened to. And really? I had a list of my symptoms and I was forgetting them because I often would get anxiety to even start explaining myself because I so often got cut off by the doctor. Like if I said I have constipation, then they would go to that treatment. So they wouldn't let me I would come with a notebook I would have to come with a notebook because one, I had so many symptoms, and two, I didn't feel heard, and three, I lost my confidence. So I just felt like this would help me like make sure I got it down to them. And even then, Dan could sense that day that he was there that I was like forgetting things. So I wasn't explaining my symptoms. And the doctor turned to him when he was like, she also has this, this, and this, and this, and this. And it was the first day I left the room feeling like, wow, they didn't look at me like I was crazy. Like they needed my husband to validate that she's not. I don't know if you've read Freud's books about hysteria. In his book, he talks about how he studied women and how they presented physiological symptoms, and they would call it hysteria. I don't know the term is that Freud studied women's hysteria, and that is something that I feel like directly affected me every visit I went to. And this wasn't just male doctors. I specifically chose women doctors because of my traumas, and I felt that I would be heard. But I feel like their training also taught them not to hear me as their peer, but rather a patient like in the books. I mean, there are our science books, our medical books specifically write about specific types of people and how to treat them. And I know for sure that there's specific ways that women are to be treated and to be listened to and not listened to. So,
you know, it's that's what I suspected, because from what I've read, a lot of people have similar experiences. It seems like when a woman, well, studies prove that when women go to a doctor with pain, they're prescribed pain medication less than men. It just seems like when women present health issues, I don't understand. I don't get the psychology behind it. I don't understand it, but they're just brushed off as it being an emotional issue or crazy or hysteria, or I don't understand it. And then, you know, with guys, it's be tougher and don't be lazy. But women seem to get this stigma worse than men, I think. And
yeah.
this primarily affects women, and that's why I thought it was so important to talk to you, because
well, I want to bring up another good point. So I couldn't tell you in numbers, but I know for certain that for years studies have been done primarily by men, for men, about men, and when they're done about women, they're being done by men.
Yeah.
So if I'm presenting myself to a doctor and they know what's the term? They know research articles, and they're in their head, they're processing research articles and where I may fit in that. If there isn't enough representation about a woman's experience, and let's say there is a woman representation in the experience, but a man is writing it about how she cried because X, Y, and Z, or she was upset because of X, Y, and Z, from the male perspective, like, how would you even be able to process why something bothers me or hurts me, like, without being able to step into my shoes? And now that's being taught in the books, and now that's how I'm being received in the office. You feel it firsthand. You feel like I'm not being heard, I'm not being understood, and even you're being disciplined to not hear me or understand me, even though you're a woman. Like that happened to me with even my pregnancy.
Wow. Yeah, that's upsetting to hear. I mean, it's because you're already dealing with an illness that in general people aren't listening, and then you throw in that, and it just seems like you're just completely being brushed off to the side. During this whole journey that you've had with fibro, what would you say are your 3 main symptoms that affect you the most?
That's a hard question. It's hard because I think it's very cyclical. So the way that I analyze this condition and how it affects me, because I pride myself on being, the most important thing to me is to be coherent and like clear-minded, and it causes me a lot of brain fog. But the brain fog isn't the first symptom that happens to me. It's really an episode that comes from fatigue and then fatigue not allowing me to work out, to eat well, and then sleep. And so then over time, naturally, we're not having as much oxygen, we're not having enough nutrients, we're not having enough rest, and so that we end up in brain fog. And I'm not even able to express myself clearly, not just about how like I want to speak to you or say something or show my intelligence or clarity, but I can't even express how I'm feeling on the inside. I get to the point. So then the next step from brain fog, I would say the second, is how it affects me emotionally because of that physical symptom. Emotionally, I feel like I'm either sad, angry, or frustrated about not being able to present my full potential. Like I know what's inside of me. I know who I've always been, but it's not, I don't feel like it's appearing. It didn't show up today. Like it stayed in bed. I don't know where it is.
I
And then,
did a video on brain fog too, and that's something that I think is maybe the worst symptom as well.
yes, brain fog, and then emotional kind of imbalance that comes from that. And then the third, I think I don't know, because the pains as far as like my swelling or my elbow hurting or my knee hurting, like I'm able to kind of turn down the volume on a specific pain and get through the day because I'm pretty strong and this condition has taught me to be strong. But I think the hardest parts of the emotional damage it does for me, it makes me so insecure. That's harder for me because you get into this complex of thinking you're not worthy, even though you're giving it your all, but your all doesn't feel like the all that you know you can give. Or you wish you could give because you're perhaps not the same that you were at one. I think maybe we can agree to this, and perhaps other people can agree to this, is that there was a pivotal moment, perhaps didn't happen overnight, but where you stopped being that person that you always knew you were. And to not be that person is so frustrating until you forgive your body for being what it is and who it is and being okay with that, this new body. And I compare this a lot to what I just learned about motherhood, that my body will never be the same, but it just did something awesome. Likewise with fibro, it's being awesome in that every single day I wake up. Every single day I have a whole body, perhaps not working at full potential as much as I would like, but every day it's here and present. And me needing to be present mentally, physically, and emotionally is what I have to battle every day.
I think that's a great point. One thing that a lot of people with this illness, and I'm sure other illnesses, but I think more so this one, you have to mourn who you were, because and people don't take that into account, that you're actually mourning as well as being sick, as well as being frustrated, as well as being emotional, maybe depressed, maybe frustrated, angry, sad. You're mourning what you were. And the interesting part is a lot of people, when you're describing not being able to be what you know you can, most people around you can't tell that you're not being who you know
I
you
agree.
can, which kind of makes you feel a little bit more alone because they will never understand, but you have more to give, but they don't know that, right? So it's a kind of an isolating feeling. I have another question. This one is one that I asked myself not long ago, and it to me was kind of a tough question. But if you can go back to when you said you were 19 when it really kind of manifested.
Mm-hmm.
If you can go back to the day after or the week after that this all started, what would you tell your 19-year-old self?
Buckle up. I really would. I would have said, buckle up. Like it because it's been the most painful and yet most rewarding, because I think that like this is what I'm gonna cry.
That's okay. That's okay.
You know, even if I were never to accomplish becoming a doctor, which like, you know, I know that my purpose, like it helped me find my purpose. Like I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor for the fact that I love science and I love helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the biggest thing that I learned was that like, no matter how hard we try, we sometimes can't step into other people's shoes. and that's okay, but it's important to listen. And honestly, sometimes I think one of the things that we miss in medicine is that like we as individuals know our body more than anyone else, and the solution to our health is within us. And if doctors knew that part of their responsibility is to empower us by listening and helping guide us, to lead with that foot. I don't think that doctors don't know that. I think that the system that we have in so many countries doesn't encourage them to lead with that foot. The solution is, or the purpose is to find solutions, and empowering you isn't necessarily a solution because it's a journey. And that's what I had to like learn to like understand, that like I had to go through a specific journey, and we as individuals, because we're made up of such unique organisms, are gonna have individual journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. None of them are really the same.
Yeah, and I wish that like I had a doctor when I was going through it say, you know what, like perhaps I don't understand what you're going through. You know, let's walk hand in hand trying to figure it out.
No,
And perhaps we may never figure it out.
Yeah.
But you know that you are being heard. Like and
So,
I've had a handful of people along the way, I would say therapists, and that's literally their job to say you're being heard, and that empowered me. But I've also had support from loved ones who have said that, you know, and I think in the more open I became, the more that they knew that that's actually what I needed.
that was actually my next question, is how has it been with family and friends? I'm part of support groups like online and stuff, and one of the most heartbreaking things that I often see is people's spouses leaving, not believing them, family just saying, you know, we're all tired, or we're all achy, stop complaining. Like, how has that experience been for you? Have you been fortunate enough to have family that understands? I know your spouse understands, you have a great husband, but
I feel like both my parents, they didn't get the opportunities to even care for themselves in that respect. Like, you know, they've had to focus on caring for others and providing. That when it came to like taking the time to hear me, it was like, oh cool, you're getting taken care of, like good. As far as like, do they believe me or not believe me, I think they treated it a lot like other doctors were like, why don't you try this? It was very much solution based. So I did feel alone, but I don't think it was their intention.
they believed you were ill, though, at least.
I guess it depends on what we think ill is. Like, I think, you know, the definition of ill is often something presented, like a cough, a cold, a fever. I think that what they understood was, you know, my daughter doesn't feel well, but that's not the same as being ill.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a dissonance between our conversations. Like, I think when they started to understand that I wasn't well, and this actually goes back to being a woman, was me sharing conversations about how Dan and I had to have conversations about how he really didn't understand the depth of my life, but being with me and seeing me push through. Like, for example, because I met him when I was around 20, and at that time when we met, I used to run up to 3 miles, like at least 4 to 5 days a week. And as time went on, the condition was really, really affecting me. And I also went to Chicago, so it was colder, and it just a lot of things were snowballing.
Yeah.
There was a point where I reached I couldn't run at all. I couldn't get out of bed. So for someone to and that really helped, to know the me that was there at one point, to all of a sudden not be there, and witness that, like, what specifically happened, we couldn't pinpoint it, you know. It just didn't make sense. So for him to like perhaps maybe doubt me at some point and think like, oh, she just all of a sudden is depressed and lazy or something, I don't know, he never expressed to me what he thought, but he did express to me, I didn't know what you were actually going through until you started talking to me about it, because I could see one thing and tried to add two together and they weren't making sense. So you opening up like helped.
Yeah, that's you're fortunate to have a husband like that. A lot of the people that I speak to, no matter how they articulate what they're going through, they don't even want to hear it. It's something that I find very disturbing. Like if you're in the middle of a chronic illness and you can't even lean on your family or your spouse, it's like my heart breaks when I hear about people that are just completely, you're already alone with this illness, even if you have a family supporting you, and to not have a family or spouse that even believes you. um, I feel horrible for people going through that. um,
I agree. I
yeah, I
completely
think
agree.
that might be the worst part about this illness for a lot of people.
I
um,
think is we don't even have the it's not like there's a paper that I can bring to someone and say, this is what I have, and concretely, these are my symptoms. It presents because of this or X, Y, and Z, and prove it to someone. And it took, I'm grateful for my husband being so understanding, but I think that it shouldn't take someone having to live with me day in and day out to
no,
try to comprehend me.
no.
I'm grateful that he's someone who's willing to try to comprehend me, and that makes the difference between anyone just trying.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it was new to him too. It was new for all of us.
yeah, yeah. It reminds me of when we first met when we're in Chicago, and just hearing like what you had gone through. I was so shocked to hear how similar it was to my journey.
Me
Although
too.
they differ in many ways. Like a lot of how you recall being sick, and how it started, and exercising a lot, and then all of a sudden you couldn't. I went through the exact same thing, and it was just something I didn't know what was happening, and it's a confusing time. It's like you're not well, you're confused. There's just a lot of emotions going on, which is why I think a lot of doctors just start throwing antidepressants at people, because
Hmm.
rightfully so, they are probably dealing with anxiety. They probably are depressed that they're stuck in bed all day with these new symptoms they can't really articulate, especially if brain fog is kicking in and you can't even really describe what you're feeling. Um, yeah, that's one thing that I hope in the future here they start to understand they're two separate issues most of the time. But
It brings on those feelings.
yeah,
I would, but I think this is where we should touch on the fact of trauma, because I would say that even as a child, so okay, so my mom as a child would call me Doña Dolores, which means Mrs. Pain. So as a child, um, I there were different experiences, but I was sexually abused when I was a child. That I didn't understand this until I was in my teenage years, and even then, not until that time when I was like 19 did I understand. It's like I know it happened to me, but I didn't understand how to process it. And at that age of being 19 and being more sexually active and trying to have meaningful long-term relationships with people, there's something that was always impeding me, and it was that trauma. Like, and that wasn't my only abuse. Like, I was like verbally in a household that was verbally abusive. So I was deemed not only Doña Dolores, but also like that I was angry and frustrated as a kid. And there's so much that I'm sure I wanted to express. Uh, and my pains were aches. My pains were physical aches. But I wonder how much of that is connected to emotional aches that weren't seen or heard. And over time, my body learned that we gotta deal with this. We gotta express it. We gotta let it out. And that means that like you're gonna be achy, but like you can get through it. And knowing that like almost like teaching my body that like there's danger. Like there are bad things that can happen to you, and almost expecting it. I feel like my body is tense. Like a lot of what fibro feels like is tightness, wound up, intense. And when I can mentally and emotionally and spiritually relax, but I'm not even aware where those keys are. That's what my journey took, to find the keys of how to even unwind those. They were built over the years, and I don't know if it's genetic or connected to the two. Like the traumas that happened unlocked a genetic issue, or I always had that genetic issue. That's the part I don't know. I only remember specific things of my childhood, but I was never in the hospital for Doña Dolores. Like it was like, oh mom, my leg hurts. Oh mom, my arm hurts. Never had a fever. Was the healthiest of the children. But why would I have that name? Like, like, and unfortunately at that time, for so many reasons, going to the doctor other than a wellness visit wasn't a thing. There was either not access, it wasn't important, so many reasons.
Yeah, that we discussed this before we started recording, but I do think certain traumas as a kid can have very large effects on the immune system. It's hard to tell, the chicken or the egg, which one came first, really. But I do think they're intertwined to some degree. I think going through some of the terrible experiences you just described have to have an effect on a developing immune system in some way or another. Like I was saying, I had a father that passed away at a young age. I was there when it happened. I saw it happen. I was a very healthy kid as well too, but around the same age as you, early 20s, I came down with a chronic illness. So I am very interested to see if maybe there's more studies moving forward in relation to really severe traumas like the one that you described, and physical pain and physical illness, and maybe unlocking that genetic issue that we might already have. I don't know which one came first, but
there's a term in Spanish called desencadenar, which means to release the chain, almost like when you drop the chain of an anchor. Mm-hmm. And it just starts going. And I feel like and the way that the term is used in Spanish is to say that something has been unlocked and now it's going to flow. And I feel like at being 19 and trying to understand myself, because we come into a different awareness when we are now individuals, not under our parents and their direction and their instruction. And now we're like, what is my body saying? What is my brain saying? Who am I? And we're trying to define all those things. And they're at a crossroads of who you've been all along and who you want to be and who you've succeeded at being. Like I was succeeding at being healthy, eating healthy, doing all these routines, but I wasn't taking care of that part of me that was feeling pain all the time, whether physical or emotional. Yeah. And now they're just battling each other. And now my life consists of constantly trying to find that balance. And I know that we all go through that, but there's something about our condition that like, it is like a marked point in expression that makes you like, oh my God, I need to like be in bed for 10 weeks because I haven't like focused on that little noise or pain that was bothering me. And now it's exacerbated.
Yeah.
I always feel like if I could look back, I can see that day that it was kind of desencadenó, like it like the chain got loose, like someone dropped the anchor and it finally hits that bottom. And I feel now I'm in the depths of the water. Now I have to pull myself up.
It sounds like you've managed to wrap your head around this illness really well. I think a lot of people haven't been able to get where you're at. They're still struggling to understand themselves. You have a very good grasp on where you are and your emotions and whatnot. I feel like that probably helps you a lot in feeling better. What are some of the things that have worked for you as far as feeling better, strategies? Like, I have to pace myself. Sometimes I have to, it hurts my pride, but I got to tell, Anna, I have to stop and sit down, which I've been athletic most of my life and it's hard for me to do. But I have to stop. And it is something that I really had to learn and retrain myself to do. Do you do certain things like that? Maybe medicine, supplements, and other strategies?
I think the number one thing, and this is for all of wellness, I think this could fit anyone. You have to learn to hear yourself. there is a voice that always tells you too much, too little, or just enough. That is the power that whatever greater being you believe in that is within us, that we have the ability to hear our body saying yes, no, maybe.
Our American culture pushes against that, though. Everything's push through, fight more, work harder, you know,
I
achieve
agree.
goals, and just, it's tough.
And I would call that be in touch with your soul, because your soul only has one purpose, and it's to be well, like to be present. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to go into the future, we're trying to go into the past, and this illness, I feel, reminds you that your past isn't so far, and that your future may not be so far if you don't stay in the present. It really just forces you to feel both, and the present is actually the best place to be in. And that, so that goes to what tools I use. I've read a lot of books about spirituality, and as a child I was always connected to it, but when I was at that crossroads of my wellness and not feeling that there was an answer in others, I turned to myself. And that's the whole concept of advocacy, and I have to believe in me before anyone believes in me. So what is me telling me? What is my body saying to me? Is it saying rest? Is it saying eat? Is it saying you're frustrating because you don't listen and you don't accept your own body? It's all of that. And then it's just like forgiveness when you don't hear yourself, or when you ignore yourself because you want, you know, desire is another thing very connected to, it's almost like the other hand of spirituality, like desire leads us astray from ourself. And that's, I think that's also part of this natural world, that the desires existed to almost be in duality with our spirituality. But I think spirituality, because there's no physical answer, there's nothing that has solved it, there's nothing that has removed it from me, it just gets easier to live with, I think. I don't know if easier, but I can live with.
Yeah.
I can walk along with.
I think you've said a lot of very enlightening things. I'm going to encourage people that watch this video to encourage you to maybe start your own YouTube channel. And I think you have a lot to offer. So if people watching this, leave in the comments how much knowledge you think she just gave. I think you gave a lot of really good advice for a lot of people. And you're speaking to a group of people that I can touch on, but I can't speak to. I can't speak on the woman's experience with this. And I try to bring it up and be an advocate, but I can't articulate it and express it like you, because I don't live that. I think you added a lot of really good points. Thanks for taking the time to do this with me. We've wanted to do it for a long time. Now that everything's shut down and it's a little bit easier to do, I guess.
I actually think we're at the best time to do that, because we're also at a time where the conversation used to be, women deserve more, but they'll get it, or they have enough. It's no big deal. And today there's a bigger conversation about what are we doing that isn't allowing women to have. For example, you know, the NBA, why are they not making the same amount of money? Like soccer, why are they not making the same amount of money? That boundary is there in every facet of our life as far as being women. Like, why are we not being heard? And we're at a time where the men of our families are saying, let me take inventory. Where am I at fault in some of this? And that's a big difference. And perhaps they're even defensive, but their love for the women in their lives makes them maybe listen differently, I think, is the time that we're in.
I hope so. I mean, just health-wise, like not even career and wage and all those things, which is an issue. Just health-wise, like I said, I'm disgusted by some of the stories I've heard about. There's been a couple people that have told me they went to the doctor women, and they were basically just told to quit nagging and find a boyfriend. Like, as if that would, I don't even want to get into that, but it just,
Yeah.
some of these answers and some of these things women have been told are
that you're bored. But that actually goes to the point of the fact there's so many more women who I sit on shoulders that I am grateful for, because there's so women who trailblazed to say, you know, your excuse is that I sit on my ass all day. Well, guess what? I not only now do the same job, but I deserve X, Y, and Z. I deserve to be listened to. I deserve to be appreciated because I can do it like you or better.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects the way that the woman is being seen in the office, right? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, you're a stay-at-home mom. Like if I lead with the foot that I'm a stay-at-home mom, which I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I work in the evenings. I don't even have to present that. I shouldn't have to, but I feel like I have to constantly throw that in there to be heard as I'm not sitting on my ass all day.
Yeah, because that's assumed, right?
I have to defend myself.
And another thing that's assumed is that women complain about aches and pains more. I think women are tougher than men generally when it comes to pain management. I don't think men would be able to have children. When men catch the flu or get a cold, I want to go to the ER.
They fall apart.
Like she just goes to work, like as if nothing happened. She's way tougher than me when it comes to that kind of stuff. So when this whole misconception that women are just complaining and you know, more sensitive to pain and don't manage pain well enough, I'm not really buying that at all.
I have a theory that women expressing their pain, whether intentionally or unintentionally, like subconsciously or consciously, I think it's part of the tool of even getting through the pain. Because I think we are going through far more physical pain, especially rearing children, and the mental capacity to really lead the family. I'm not saying be the only one in the family doing things, but like the responsibility has been put on women to lead, like mentally and emotionally sometimes. The association with this theory is the thought of martial arts, where when you are going to take a punch, you like take this deep breath and have to let it out. I feel the same way of like words being expressed. Like you're letting out air physically when you're speaking, but you're also letting out the weight of the thought of pain inside of you. So the more I let it out and just leave it on that shelf or get it out of me, I'm able to get through the next thing. Whereas men, you're not even taught to speak and let things out, and you have to hold it in, which is a lot of the way that men express themselves. Not all, because we have very different men, but it's a lot of the way that we've been taught for generations. I will say like traditional thoughts are related to that. So that's my theory, that we do it to like get through.
I think women are tougher personally.
But guess what? Like when you were a kid, that's probably what you were taught. Your mom, who took on your pain because you as a boy were having pain, now had to carry the pain and probably complain about her back because she had to carry you because you had a boo-boo. Like it's, you know, it's traditional roles. And I think that deeply affected me with my illness, traditional roles, where I should have just had to get over the pain and get through it. And I think that's why we didn't tackle it perhaps maybe early age when it presented itself. Perhaps there's times where it presented to my parents and people who weren't even aware of it. But now when I'm in charge of myself in my 90s and 20s, I am seeing the expression of it. But it may have already been there.
Yeah. I loved talking to you.
Likewise.
Thank you for doing this with me. I think it's important for people to see two people discussing something that's not discussed enough online, on TV, or anywhere. Hopefully it brings some type of comfort to people watching this, that they're not alone, that there are people going through similar things from the opposite sex, different parts of the country, and we can relate to a lot of things. I hope a lot of people watching this can relate to some of the struggles you've gone through, and find some comfort in that. So if you have anything else to add, I'm going to wrap up. But I just want to thank you. And honestly, thank you for sharing such personal and deep things on here. I know that's not easy to do.
It's my pleasure. I think I will wrap it up with, I'm so grateful for this conversation, because another thing that we didn't talk about that I think is ultimately healing for this process is vulnerability. And this has challenged me to be exponentially vulnerable, because I can be vulnerable with uh, people that I'm intimate with, but on a platform where a lot of people will see it is really hard for me. But I know that that's such a big thing that I have been avoiding doing. And I think that that loneliness of this condition makes you want to hide in that shell more, like not want to be vulnerable, but it actually helps heal. So
I'm confident that your sharing this is going to bring comfort to people out there. So, keep that in mind as well.
yes, that's what I'm hoping for. So that would be my final note: vulnerability.
Thank you, Sadi. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
All
Talk
right.
to you guys